What's good, everybody? My name is Sweat, and we're back talking fantasy football week 10. I lost again. Big surprise. My record's 2-8. I'm still only 2 games behind the last playoff spot, and I'm going to need a miracle. I just traded for Khalil Shakir. I gave up Nick Chubb, but with Dalton Kincaid out, Keon Coleman's out, Amari Cooper's banged up, I'm hoping Shakir has a big game this week against the Chiefs. Starting off with the Thursday night game, Bengals and Ravens. These games are always fun to watch. It came down to the end like it always does. The Bengals decided to go for the 2-point conversion and they didn't get it, so the Ravens ended up hanging on by 1 point. Everybody on both teams is a must start. Joe Burrow had a crazy good game, 428 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Chase Brown had 13 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Yes, he did have that 1 fumble, but he also had 9 catches for 52 yards. And Ja'Marr Chase just had an insane game. 11 catches, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This man got over 50 points in everybody's fantasy league. And I started Mike Gesicki this week. He was disappointing, only 4 catches for 30 yards, but it was the backup tight end Tanner Hudson who had a better game. 6 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. So moving forward, I'm just going to put Gesicki back on the bench. And all the Ravens had a good game. Lamar Jackson, 290 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. He also ran the ball 7 times for 33 yards. And Derrick Henry had 16 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown. And all the receivers had a good game as well. Mark Andrews, 6 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. Rashad Bateman, 6 catches for 54 yards and a touchdown. Zay Flowers was the one who took a step back. He didn't get in the end zone, but he still had 4 catches for 34 yards. And this other kid, Tylan Wallace, he had 3 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. So we know all these guys are must starts for both teams. Moving on to the Germany game, Giants and Panthers. The Panthers ended up pulling it off in overtime. The Giants running back Tyrone Tracy fumbled, and they just kicked a field goal to win it. There's really only 2 guys worth talking about in this game, and that was both running backs. Chuba Hubbard had 28 carries for 153 yards and a touchdown, and he also had 4 catches for 16 yards. So Chuba Hubbard has really stepped his game up this year as far as fantasy goes, and he's a must start every week. And Tyrone Tracy had 18 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. Yes, he did have that fumble, but he's clearly taken over the 1 spot over Devin Singletary. Moving on to the Bills and Colts. Josh Allen had a weird game, 280 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he ran the ball 8 times for 50 yards and had a touchdown. So our running game got off to a slow start, and it was pretty disappointing because the Colts have the 2nd worst run defense in the league. But James Cook picked it up in the second half. He ended up with 19 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown. And as far as our receivers go, they all had average games because, like I said, Josh didn't have any passing touchdowns. Matt Collins, 4 for 86. Shakir, 6 for 58. Knox, 2 for 40. But the one that concerns me is Dalton Kincaid. He went out with a knee injury, and then he came back, but then he went out again. So I hope that it's not a long-term injury. He might be out this week because we do have a bye week next week. But damn, we have a big game coming up against Kansas City this week. So we need everybody we can get. And Joe Flacco had a bad game. He had a pick 6 on his very first pass of the game, which was freaking awesome for me to see. But he ended up with 272 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And he also got sacked 4 times and lost a fumble. Jonathan Taylor had a pretty good game rushing versus us, but I thought he should have got much more involved in the passing game, a few more screens here and there, but he ended up with 21 carries, 114 yards, and only caught the ball twice for 8 yards. But we know he's a must start every week. And as far as their receivers go, their main 3 guys did good without Michael Pittman playing in this game. Alec Pierce, he did have a garbage time TDA at the end. He had 4 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. Josh Downs went 7 for 72. And Adonai Mitchell had 6 catches for 71 yards. So if Michael Pittman's going to be out moving forward, I would say all these guys are must starts, whether you want to put them in your receiver position or your flex. Moving on to the Niners and Bucks. This game came down to the end just like a lot of them did. Jake Moody hit the game-winning field goal even though he missed 3 earlier in the game. But Brock Purdy had a good game, 353 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And McCaffrey had a good first game back. He had 13 carries for 39 yards, and he had 6 catches for 68 yards. So we know he's a must start every week, and I'm sure his owners are happy to have him back. Moving on to the receivers, Ricky Pearsall had his first career touchdown. He went 4 for 73, and my guy Jauan Jennings 7 for 93. Didn't have a touchdown this week, but in my opinion, he's a must start every week. And Deebo Samuel went 5 for 62, but George Kittle really saved his week because of that nice pass from Purdy in the corner of the end zone. He ended up with 3 catches for 57 yards and that 1 touchdown. And as far as the Bucs go, not a very good game from Baker. He only had 116 yards passing, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He got sacked twice. Bucky Irvin had a good day though. He had 13 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 catches for 14 yards. And Rachaad White had a great game. 10 carries for 31 yards and 6 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. So I still think both of these running backs are must starts every week. As far as the receivers go, not much to mention here. Cade Otton is the only one, 5 catches for 35 yards. He's still a must start every week. Moving on to the Falcons and Saints. The Saints ended up pulling this one off in the end because the Falcons kicker doesn't know how to make his kicks. Kirk Cousins had 306 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception. But Bijan had a good game. He had 20 carries for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also added 3 catches for 28 yards. But as far as the receivers go, like I said, nobody scored a touchdown. But Drake London went 8 for 97, Mooney went 5 for 96, and Kyle Pitts went 4 for 55. So I still think all these guys are must starts every week. And Derek Carr actually had a pretty good game. 269 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Alvin Kamara only had 17 carries for 55 yards, but he had 5 catches for 54 yards, so we know he's a must start every week. And don't look now, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling might be worth a waiver wire pickup. He had 3 catches for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't necessarily think it was a lucky day because the Saints don't have any wide receivers left. Chris Olave is out with a concussion. Who knows when he's going to come back, if he even comes back this year. Rashid Shaheed's already out for the season. And their other receiver, Bub Means, is on the IR, so he's out for at least a month. So keep an eye on this situation. Moving on to the Broncos and Chiefs. Tough break for the Broncos. They did everything perfect leading up to the end of the game. Clock management, timeouts, all that. And they just couldn't block on the field goal. And the Chiefs ended up blocking the field goal and getting another win to stay undefeated. Bo Nix actually had a pretty good game against this defense. He had 215 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And this backfield is shuffled again. Jaleel McLaughlin and Javonte Williams barely got any playing time this week. But this other kid, Audric Estime, or S-Time, however you pronounce it, he's the one who seems to be getting the majority of the work. He had 14 carries for 53 yards. So I think he's going to be a top waiver wire pickup this week. But I'm not sure if I would necessarily start him depending on his matchup next week. But if you're desperate, you might want to put him in your flex. As far as their receivers go, Courtland Sutton had a good game. 6 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. And their other receiver, Devon Vele, 4 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. As far as the Chiefs go, Pat Mahomes had an alright game. 266 yards passing, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Kareem Hunt only had 14 carries for 35 yards. But he did have 7 catches for 65 yards. So keep an eye, because I'm not sure how that situation is going to work. When Pacheco comes back, he might actually come back this week against the Bills, so we'll see. And as far as the receivers go, Travis Kelce, 8 for 64 and a touchdown, and DeAndre Hopkins, 4 for 56. We know they're must starts every week, and I think they're getting Juju back this week, if not the following week, so he's just going to add more to their offense. Moving on to Pittsburgh and Washington, the Steelers did what they had to do to get it done. It didn't look good when Jaylen Warren fumbled at the 1-yard line, but they figured out a way to get it done in the end, and that's all that matters. Russell Wilson had a pretty good game, 195 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception, but if your quarterback is injured or on a bye week, he's worth starting in my opinion. And they ran the ball heavy this game. Jaylen Warren had 14 carries for 66 yards. Najee Harris had 21 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown. So it looks like Warren's getting more involved in this offense, so he also might be worth a pickup this week and a flex start. And the only one worth mentioning this week is George Pickens. He had 5 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown, so we know he's a must start every week. As far as Washington goes, they didn't play very well. Jaden Daniels only had 202 yards passing, no touchdowns, and he only ran the ball for 5 yards this week. And Brian Robinson Jr. was out again this week, but Austin Eckler stepped up. He had 13 carries for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. And as far as the receivers go, the only one worth mentioning is Terry McLaurin. He had 5 catches for 113 yards, so we know these guys are must starts every week. Moving on to the Vikings and Jaguars, there's not much to talk about in this game. This game was horrible to watch. Sam Darnold had 241 yards passing, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Aaron Jones, 17 carries for 88 yards. Cam Akers, 13 for 38. TJ Hawkinson did have a nice game. He had 8 catches for 72 yards, but everybody else did not have a good game. Even Justin Jefferson, only 5 catches for 48 yards. As far as the Jaguars go, Mac Jones got the start because Trevor Lawrence was out with an injury. Only 111 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, so both quarterbacks sucked this game. The Vikings only won because they got 4 field goals and their defense stepped up. Mac Jones did have that lone rushing touchdown, but it just wasn't good enough. As far as everybody else on that team, Travis Etienne, only 11 carries, 44 yards. Evan Ingram, 6 for 40. And everybody else just fell off. Gabe Davis, 1 for 19. Brian Thomas, 2 for 12. So they're just not a good offense, even with Trevor Lawrence in. And another ugly game, Patriots versus the Bears. Drake May only had 184 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Ramondre Stevenson had an alright day, 20 carries for 74 yards. And their receivers didn't do very well either. Austin Hooper, 3 for 64. Demario Douglas, 4 for 50. Hunter Henry, only 1 catch for 14 yards. So not a very good game from the Patriots. They ended up winning off of 1 touchdown and 4 field goals. And the Bears are just awful right now. Caleb Williams can't figure it out. They just fired their offensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure Bears fans are calling for the head coach to be fired. So we'll see what happens if they lose again this week. But as far as their stats go, not good at all. Caleb Williams, 120 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and he got sacked 9 times. And I did watch the film over. It wasn't necessarily his offensive line's fault. He was just taking too long to throw the ball. Moving on to the afternoon games, Eagles and Cowboys. The Cowboys are just a horrible team right now. They weren't very good with Dak, and now without him, they're even worse. Cooper Rush only had 45 yards passing. Trey Lance came in, had 21 yards passing. So that tells you what to expect from the receiver stats. Jake Ferguson, 4 for 24. CeeDee Lamb, 6 for 21. Jalen Tolbert, 3 for 14. Just a horrible day for Cowboys fans. And even Dowdle didn't have a very good game. 12 carries for 53 yards. So moving forward, I guess you have to start CeeDee Lamb based off of his name, but I would stay away from this whole team. As far as the Eagles go, they all had pretty good games. Jalen Hurts, 202 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Saquon Barkley, 14 carries, 66 yards. But all 4 of their running backs combined had almost 200 yards rushing. So just a very bad day for the Cowboys. And A.J. Brown is the only one worth mentioning. He had 5 catches for 109 yards. Keep an eye on Devontae Smith. I think he had some sort of injury. I don't know if it was his wrist or concussion, but just keep an eye on him moving forward. Moving on to the Titans and Chargers. Will Levis had an alright game. 175 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And they still got Calvin Ridley heavily involved. 5 catches for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the disappointment of the week was the guy I was talking about last week, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. He only had 3 catches for 31 yards. So I know they don't really have much options at the wide receiver group. So I would still keep him on my bench and kind of wait and see. As far as the Chargers go, they also had an alright game stats-wise. Herbert, 164 yards passing, 1 touchdown. Gus Edwards came back from injury. He had 10 carries for 55 yards. J.K. Dobbins, 15 for 50. Justin Herbert also ran the ball 9 times for 32 yards and a touchdown. And all the receivers didn't have a very good day either. Ladd McConkey, 2 for 52. Josh Palmer, 1 for 36. Will Dissly, 5 for 30. So just keep an eye on this group. They're a very run-heavy type of team. So I'm not too sure which receivers to start. I know Ladd McConkey had a big game a couple weeks back. So I'm not too sure if you want to put these guys in your flex position or hang on to them as more of a wait and see. Moving on to the Jets and Cardinals. The Jets lost again. The Cardinals are looking good. They're first place in the NFC West. But Aaron Rodgers is just not what he used to be anymore. Only 151 yards passing, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in this game. And everybody else just had an average day. Garrett Wilson, 5 for 41. Devontae Adams, 6 for 31. Breece Hall, 4 catches for 31 yards, and he had 10 carries for 52 yards. So I don't know what to do with this Jets team anymore. I would still continue starting the 3 main guys, Wilson, Adams, and Breece Hall, but Aaron Rodgers is really holding this team back. As far as the Cardinals go, Kyler Murray had a great game. 266 yards passing, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He also ran the ball 3 times for 21 yards and had 2 touchdowns. So we know he's a must start every week. And as far as their running backs go, combined, they almost had 150 yards rushing against the Jets defense, which last year was known as one of the top run defenses in the league. And they just took a huge step back this year. Trey Benson, 10 carries for 62 yards. James Conner, 12 for 33. DeMarcado, 3 for 22. So pretty good game overall from their running backs. And James Conner also had 5 catches for 80 yards. And Trey McBride, 4 for 71. As well as Marvin Harrison Jr., 5 catches for 54 yards and a touchdown. So everybody got involved in this game as far as the Cardinals go. Moving on to the Sunday night game, Lions and Texans. This game was insane to me. Jared Goff had 5 interceptions and they still won the game? How the hell does that even happen? He had 240 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Their running backs did well. Jahmyr Gibbs had 19 carries for 71 yards and 2 catches for 37 yards. And David Montgomery had 12 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. As far as their receivers go, Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown were the only ones who had a touchdown. Laporta went 3 for 66 and St. Brown 6 for 60. So even when the Lions are having an off day, they still find a way to get it done. As far as the Texans go, not a very good game from CJ Stroud. 232 yards passing, 1 touchdown. He had 2 interceptions and he also got sacked 4 times. And Joe Mixon had an alright game, 25 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown. And he also had 2 catches for 44 yards. So he's still a must start every week. As far as the receivers go, they all had alright games. Tank Dell, 5 for 39. Dalton Schultz, 3 for 66. But John Mechie is the one who stood out this game. He had 5 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. But with Nico Collins most likely coming back next week, I don't think he's going to get very many targets moving forward. And finishing off the week with the Monday night game, Rams and Dolphins. This game was kind of boring, but the Dolphins did what they had to do to get it done. Tua had a mid-game, 207 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He got sacked 3 times. A-Chain took a step back this week, 12 carries for 37 yards and only 5 catches for 15 yards. And their receivers, they all pretty much underperformed. Jalen Waddle, 3 for 57. Jonnu Smith, 3 for 45. Tyreek Hill, 3 for 16. He did have a touchdown, but it just sucks because he's on my team and he's not getting the touches that he was at the beginning of the season. And as far as the Rams go, they just couldn't get in the end zone. Matt Stafford, 293 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and he got sacked 4 times. He had Kyren Williams open for a touchdown and he didn't see him, so that really hurt him this week. He only had 15 carries for 62 yards, and he finally got a little bit more involved in the passing game, 5 catches for 20 yards, but like I said, nobody got in the end zone this week. But of course, Puka and Kupp did their thing. Puka had 9 catches for 98 yards, and Kupp had 7 catches for 80 yards, so we know that they're must starts. Well, that's going to be it for me this week. Of course, I took another L. I'm still 2 games behind the last playoff spot. I'm just hoping for a miracle. Maybe I can sneak into the playoffs and make some noise, but we'll see what happens. Good luck to you guys this week, and go Bills.